Welcome to EpiSTEM podcast. This EpiSTEM podcast is brought to you from the National Centre of STEM Education at the School of Education in the University of Limerick. I'm your host, Geraldine Simi, and I'm the Professor of STEM Education here at the Centre and the Director of EpiSTEM. And my co-host,
Michelle Starr, and I am the Research Liaison Officer in EpiSTEM.
welcome back everybody. And today we have a very special guest, Eamonn Mulvihill. And Eamonn is an associate teacher with us here in the School of Education at the University of Limerick. And he's also an EpiSTEM affiliate as well with us. So you're very welcome, Eamonn.
Thank you, Geraldine. I'm delighted to be here and looking forward to chatting about my research and work here in UL.
Yeah, we're looking forward. We know you for years. You've been a great help to us in the EpiSTEM Centre, developing sustainability projects and helping us with everything to get on the road. And you're doing a PhD, and we know that. And you also you run your own podcast as well.
Yes, indeed, on the margins.
On the margins, and we'll get a connection. We'll somehow get a connection with your podcast as well.
Absolutely.
Just give me, I suppose this is what we do generally with with all our guests, as we ask you to kind of give us some bit of history of where have you come from?
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to my childhood, I suppose, in my family, my parents, one is a civil servant, my mother's a civil servant, and then my dad is, he runs an independent car dealership back in my van in County Kerry. And I suppose through that then I have, over the years, developed a love for engineering, graphics, construction and so on. And in secondary school then I would have picked up the subjects of engineering, and then I think it was around TY I was looking through my phone and a couple of photos going back the last couple of weeks, and I seen a photo of the programme that I've now completed, the teacher training programme for engineering and graphics teaching. So it would have been at that stage that I went from helping out in the garage to thinking about it as a career and a teaching career. And yeah, from that then I picked up DCG at senior cycle. And
that's in the school in Tarbert, is it?
In the school in Tarbert,
the comprehensive school. Is it in Tarbert? Yeah,
correct. The comprehensive school in Tarbert would have been my secondary school, and then following that, I went on and I studied LMO 95 as the course, which would be undergraduate teacher training course for engineering and graphics.
Here in UL, yeah, lovely. And just we all know of that Tarbert Comprehensive School so well because of John Coollahan.
Yes,
John was a past pupil, was he?
Yes.
Professor John Coollahan. Who's deceased now, but was well known. I worked with him for a full year in the University in Maynooth. He's the most well known, I suppose, education policy person in the country.
Yes, a very well known figure, and I suppose I wouldn't have known John personally, but through the years, definitely the Coollahan family in Tarbert, I'd have been very close and have close connections to them. So it's a small circle.
It's a good affiliation.
Yeah.
And going back to your secsecondary schooling in the comprehensive in Tarbert, so you did engineering at the time, and did that give you that love for, I want to continue this, I want to be a teacher in this?
Yeah, I suppose it was definitely a mix between what I was brought up in terms of in the garage and helping out with fixing cars, driving cars, figuring out what was wrong with them, the sales side of things, and that kind of led into the teaching and the career I'm in now. But as well as that, then the teaching experiences that I had in the Comp in Tarbert were, I suppose, transformational in a way, and they led me down the path of wanting to be that teacher at the top of the room and being helpful to the students.
And can you remember, just from back, what was your feeling? And was that kind of a freedom in that class for you as a young student?
Yeah, it would have definitely be a freeing experience, yes. And I suppose in some ways very challenging as well. It would have been the one subject where like the design side of things really came to the fore, that you had an opportunity to design, and I would have always found that something that was quite challenging, but I loved the challenge of that.
Creativity.
Yeah, not knowing the answers and trying to, or having to go and find them yourself was something that I loved and being part of.
Which is a different approach from other subjects, isn't it? So it's interesting. So you are now bringing that into your own third level teaching now and your PhD study as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I've heard the social care there, wanting to help others as well on the journey. The educator is there in you as well. So that social theory is there in that space, that are foundational studies that we do here in education with teachers. that's there because you actually are love of the subject and love of caring and helping others, that social care and helping and doing that, inspiring others and curiosity and all that. So I think, I'm hearing that already.
Yeah, absolutely. As you were talking about that point as well, it brings back to, or it makes me think about my current practices today, and I'm still involved in the same dealership at home, in the family dealership, and I get a great joy alone from, we have students from maybe fifth year or TY upwards that would get involved in the garage and help out, and I have a love for just training them and seeing how they're getting on and checking in with them regularly. It's a joy to watch them grow as well.
Yeah, the love of the people, the development, and as you're growing yourself and learning, that's when that kind of all, I suppose, joins together. Yes. Those pieces. So you moved on then, and you were a teaching assistant here for a while, and then you've actually become a permanent associate teacher. Tell us about what that difference was in the actual teaching contract, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. I came as a teaching assistant in 2022. I graduated in 2022, and I was coming home from a J1 at the time, and I was stopover in Chicago, and I was on the layover leg, and the phone rang, and Donald Canty, a previous guest on the podcast, rang, and he said there was a job opportunity if I was up for it, and I took that, and I've been in the university ever since. As you said, as a teaching assistant to start, enjoyed that for the first year, and then 12 months later or thereabouts, there was an opportunity as an associate teacher, and luckily I got that position, and I've been an associate teacher rather for 3 years now, and loving the role and the opportunities it brings as well.
That's it, loving the role and working with the young people, and at the same time you're studying yourself and you're doing a PhD study. Would you tell us who the supervisors are and where are you doing it?
Yes, absolutely. So the PhD study is looking at integrated STEM education, and I'm doing that in TUS, the Technological University of Shannon, and the supervisors as well then are Clodagh Reid, Rónán Dunbar, and Richard Kimbell, who's over in the UK as well.
That's lovely. And then that integrated STEM, we know that has come in kind of more at primary school level. We know, I suppose, my experience of STEM is that it grew from America in the mid-1990s at the turn of the century. Mm-hmm. It started to come in as being very important, and because we're in such a scientific, technological age at the minute, it has grown legs, but it's like as if no one knows what it actually means. There isn't a strong sense of it being somebody walking down the road and we're saying there, even though I'm a professor of STEM education, there isn't a sense that people get that identity as being a STEM person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose that's where the PhD has come from, really. It has stemmed from the fact that lots of different people have their own conceptions and ideas as to what STEM is. When I started off, I would have been involved in STEM through technology education, but through time I've definitely widened my lens as to what STEM and integrated STEM is. To, I suppose, describe it to the layperson, I would say if you were to think of the four constituent subjects of STEM, so science, technology, engineering and maths, integrated STEM is just the amalgamation or bringing those all together, and bringing it together not only in like a cookie cutter way that is putting the pieces together and hopefully they'll match up, but being intentional on that, creating an integrated, fulfilling experience for the students.
Yeah, lovely. I love it. It's opposed to the cookie cutter, but I mean, there's a vast literature about it. And I guess we could be here all day talking about that there's so many wonderful ways in which that could be brought together, and kind of I like the idea of the dancing of the pieces, and I like the idea of dancing it in there with the arts and everything, so that we have the person in there as well, because the cookie cutter, when it comes to the disciplines, don't really upset themselves too much worrying about the young people and whether they're gender or social class or culture or, I like, bringing in all of that into it. But anyway, when you want that integrated experience, what are you going after in the publications that you've done?
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose to go back to the cookie cutter analogy, first of all, my experience at the outset of my doctoral research has been around looking at different perceptions of integrated STEM. So we're talking about the cookie cutter, but if I was to use that as an analogy, the difference is that if I was in a primary school versus in a secondary school where I'll have subject specifics, or if I was to compare the teachers in the school to parents in the school, they're all going to have different types of cookie cutters. They're going to have a different idea as to what science is, what technology is, what engineering is, and what maths is. So trying to consolidate that and to get a better oversight as to what we mean by the 4 different subjects of integrated STEM. And then through that, as you mentioned, the sociological perspectives and the social lens of that, looking at what does an effective integrated STEM experience look like. So one that
and the
is
context and culture and all that.
Something that's culturally responsive, that's inclusive, and that it's not... I suppose ostracizing might be a strong word, but it's not limiting any area of society or reducing their ability to participate in.
And I've read some studies about the idea of the danger of maybe going backwards, that it would be, we still haven't got that full embodied view of kind of, the mind, the hand-head kind of dualism still exists. So we've got to be very careful that we don't go backwards with this, and it's expansive and good for everybody. As opposed to maybe narrowed, and there's the danger, I suppose, of power struggles between all the subjects and everything.
And what I'd like just picking up on that, the different perceptions of the integrated STEM now. And I know you're at the initial, you're in stages of your doctorate. What is coming out in the literature, Eamonn? What are from teachers, for examples, because it is very new.
Yes.
That this whole, STEM and, what is, and for the teachers as well. And there isn't a STEM subject yet.
No. So in primary level, there is coming a STEM subject or an STE subject at primary level, but in secondary schools in the Irish context anyway, there's no STEM subject per se. But I suppose what the integrated STEM experiences and what I'm looking at really lends to is at the outset of second level education, where students are usually picking subjects and they have the opportunity to sample subjects, and also at the TY level as well, where they're deciding what does my future career or what does my life look like after school. At those two, I suppose, stop points, I want my PhD and my research to investigate what influences students' decisions in terms of choosing different subjects, the technology education subjects, the science, the maths. What's behind those decisions, and how can we widen the participation net, not only within the technology and in the engineering subjects, but also across all of the sciences as well. So as I've talked about in the papers, it's very common in the engineering and the technology subjects that there's a they're male-dominated subjects, whereas if we look to biology, for example, it's a lot more female-dominated. And it's not that any one of those views is incorrect in any way, but I want to hopefully widen the lens so that biology is just biology and it's not female-dominated. The same as engineering is engineering. It's about a mindset as opposed to being dominated by any one gender or any one cohort of society.
Oh, yeah. So what you're going to do then is look, okay, you can see that these are gender, the proportion of in biology might be more gender, female orientated, and in the engineering technology. So you're going to look within the subjects, as in, why is this going on?
Yeah, and to provide, I suppose, gender and culture neutral aspects to the subjects, whereby instead of posing a problem in engineering that is going to be a lot more engaging to a male cohort, I want to hopefully promote just rich environments for students in general, as opposed to limiting any of those contexts to any one gender.
Yeah, which is very good. And actually the great thing about, when you're doing that as well, is recognising that, having gender neutral, but also to recognise there is a gender, because gender is socially constructed, yeah. From the moment we're all born, female girls act whatever way, boys act whatever way, and therefore it's a cultural thing. So it's recognising that, as well as being aware of not slotting into those, having those gender roles within the subject. So it's not just gender neutral. It's gender, I suppose, awareness more than anything. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, I think what I've seen here, what I love actually, I love your title of your PhD, Beyond the Silos, because actually that's what you're exploring here. Mm-hmm. And I love actually one of your conference papers that you have from proceedings here in Spain, where you actually talk about that. You said there's like a need to move away from trying to change the girls' attitudes and behaviours and all that, but to think about changing more the structures and actually, I suppose what is happening in science education, which may be interesting, is there's what's called a reimagining going on, a new imaginary going on in science education. Very strong social movement across the world trying to reimagine. So in effect, it might be one way of looking at it is a reimagining, because obviously the culture is there, and as Michelle is saying, the gender is there, so gender neutral mightn't still do it. But even though I get what you're doing, but it's reimagining the whole space of STEM. But we need to be able to do that well in Ireland, so that we so that we have a really inclusive, top class kind of integrated STEM. And my own personal view is that we won't have that until we have a real STEAM education, and that we bring in the social policy seriously with it and humanise the discourse and bring it in the arts, the ethics at the heart of it. So we trouble ethics and we trouble aesthetics and we trouble the whole lot of it. And then we create a landscape rather than a clear definition. I know engineers, you'd be racing for a clear definition, and the science people, they'd be looking for clear frameworks. And the mathematics people, God help us, they'd be looking for something very even tighter again. So the danger with that is that we'll actually maybe lose the human out of it. And of course, this is a dangerous time with artificial intelligence growing and everything, for us to lose the human out of it. Absolutely.
It's something that I've looked at over the course of my studies so far, and definitely something I want to explore further as I go through it. One thing that you mentioned there around the STEM and widening that to STEAM, it's definitely something that I've considered as I've worked through, and with the likes of the projects that I've worked with, both of you on the Eco Village project, so that was a STEAM project, and also the likes of the First Lego Leagues, which is where I hope to situate my PhD and my research with that. What they're definitely STEAM projects, but they're also looking at what's behind that, what's the context of that, what's the experience we provide to students, and what are they participating in.
And at the end of the day, that's key, the kind of the teaching, learning, the learning experiences and the immersive experiences, and how the young people come out and tell us how much they enjoyed it all and what they learned from it and all that. So that bug is there. So will we move on for a minute then to your other podcast? Your I said in competition with us on a podcast called On the Margins.
No, it's a great podcast.
Thank you.
I love the title.
It's an interesting one for sure, and it's definitely, like, on the surface of it, it's something that someone might say it doesn't really link with my research, but what I find is that it really helps me. For me, it makes me think about my maybe unconscious biases and thinks about contexts where that maybe I don't think about, or I'm again gender stereotyping in a way, or maybe SES stereotyping. So the podcast itself, On the Margins, as you mentioned, and what we do in the podcast is we examine sites of education which are often off the beaten track. They might be non-typical, non-traditional, but they're often like diverse and exceptional. So examples of guests and topics we've looked at the Clock Jordan, the Eco Village that we spoke about earlier. We've also looked at restorative practices with the likes of Joe Power. We've looked at prison education with Anita Dooley, who's an educator in the Limerick prison. And also we've worked with the likes of the Limerick Traveller Network and thought about maybe how do we consider more culturally responsive and culturally inclusive pedagogies to better represent that cohort of people and other cohorts as well.
Oh, definitely. That's something that you're going to bring in. Can you just, for our listeners, who's your co-host?
Yes, Dan O'Sullivan is my co-host. So the podcast itself, if anyone does listen,
Dr. Dan O'Sullivan.
Dr. Dan O'Sullivan. He's the main voice on the podcast, and I handle mainly the technical side of things. But it's a great opportunity for us to both explore.
And it's a great opportunity for everyone to hear about that. As you said, sites of education that are off the beaten track, that are kind of at the outliers. And meeting with different people like Joe Power on restorative practice. Do you want to just you know, if that's an interesting one, the restorative
practice. Yeah, I suppose I should say on that the goal of the podcast itself is to bring those marginalized ideas to the mainstream, and Joe Power is just one example of that. So restorative practices is a conflict resolution strategy at its core, and how we looked at that is we interviewed Joe on what he does in terms of his practices as well, and then we gave a scenario, and we looked at that and how we would maybe resolve conflict in future, or avoid conflict and better deal with conflict, which is something again that would be very topical and interesting within both teacher education but in general life as well.
Absolutely.
And what I think is so important about all of that, when you're talking about our own reflexivity, we have a huge amount to learn ourselves, because as educators we're aiming for this kind of to know our biases and to know our prejudices so that we don't other-rate people. And that's actually a hard job in terms of, that's a critical reflexivity on ourselves that we all need to be doing as educators, but that we don't really do in a great depth. And you could hear it, I remember in the presidential election this summer, I could hear a lot of prejudice there about people in prison. I heard a lot when I was listening on radio, like about the idea that if you served your prison time, could you be allowed back into Irish society fully, or were people going to always keep you out there because you had done a prison time? So we really do need to educate ourselves about reigniting, letting people fail, pick themselves up, give them another chance. The ethics of all that, isn't that hugely important?
Massive, yeah. And it gives, I suppose, me as one of the co-hosts, but the listeners as well, to really an opportunity to really think about their inherent or unconscious biases, and what do they think of prison education, or ex-prisoners, what do they think of the travelling community, and then an opportunity to learn more about that as well. And if it's a teacher listening, how do they better cater for those students, or maybe they're dealing with families who maybe have parents that might have been behind bars or incarcerated at some point. So it really gives a great opportunity to reflect on your own practices as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really convinced, I suppose the older I get, the more I'm convinced that we need to have a reflexive module inside teacher education, because teachers don't really come face to face with themselves in the mirror. They're not actually invited to do that hard, uncomfortable work. And it's a work that we need to do, because otherwise there's a danger of us popping into a classroom in a different space altogether. We'd go in a bit, there's the old parable about how to go into the room as opposed to coming out of the room, that going in humble as opposed to coming out humble when everyone has devoured you inside. So in effect that, this is hugely significant, very important for education. I would love to see you marry that with your PhD.
Yeah.
Because actually if you brought in that reflexivity, ethics, care, not other-rating people, including people, diversity, if you brought some of that into your PhD, that's my STEAM piece there. I'd work on you.
Absolutely. But no, even with the likes of technology education within the integrated STEM, or if we're looking at the podcast, it gives an opportunity, as we said, to think about our own practices, or my own practices, as I'm doing that doctoral research, but also like a recent event that we were all at, whereby the John Morris and Manus, other colleagues in the School of Education, they spoke about social and emotional learning and how that links to design and technology education in general, and how that has affordances to bring in the arts and so on within the technology subjects that we're often not exactly aware of as teachers. Sometimes it's unconscious to us, but when it was put to us in that way, it's so much more clear, and we actually do integrate the arts, maybe not in a conscious way, but it's something that was great to see.
What I find from talking to yourself, and from we spoke with Manus last week, and or maybe the week before, and that you're all the engineering, technology, that area, and in education, and you're young doctorate researchers, and it's a very new area. But what's lovely is which you don't see in the sciences and the maths, which have been there for decades and decades and decades, is that that thinking of the human, the humanity, the creative, and even thinking of gender equality and equity overall, I just think it's lovely that it's there, and it's like in the other subjects, it's like, okay, now we need to add them in.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think actually I'm hearing a lovely legacy from the School of Education in UL, because I remember even the time of Jim Gleeson and Diarmuid Leonard and all, when I came here first, that the place had been very, very strong on critical reflexivity, critical thinking, really strong and reflective practice. So it's kind of there and it's rubbed off. And what I'm hearing from students, past students of ours, is that you're actually using the language of reflection. You understand that there's something there that you got to be doing that's connected to the human, but we haven't put it out there out front.
Yes.
But what I love as well about that reflexivity that you're talking about there and the work you're doing on the margins is the importance of democratic knowledge, bringing, it's a really important job of work. In that whole area, democratizing knowledge. That's what we feel we're doing in the podcast as well.
Yes.
And I also think that exploring our own biases, and we have them, and knowing them, it's not as if we get rid of them in the morning, but creating that self-awareness, making us that bit more humble around the way we work so we don't do damage. And that we give an opportunity for everyone to play their part, and we don't need them all to look the same as us and to be the same. That we have the freedom to be, to allow people to have their differences, and that's genuine diversity as opposed to assimilating everyone to look the same.
Yes, absolutely, and yeah, that links back to the research that I'm doing as well. That the, I suppose, unique affordances of the technology and engineering disciplines to explore those marginalised areas and explore the unconscious biases in a platform which is not traditionally done, and it gives a great opportunity for students and teachers to set up an effective context rather for students to explore
and
that.
What we might remind our listeners is that we sponsored a video, a Clock Jordan video at the time of the Sustainable Development Project, and that's now out on YouTube, so people might like to download it on YouTube if they are interested. I suppose if they just go EpiSTEM and write in Clock Jordan, they'll be able to Google it or find it or connect with us somehow. Eamonn, it's been fabulous listening to you.
Thanks, Eamonn.
Michelle, do you want to add anything there?
No, it's very interesting.
Is there anything else that you want to say to us, or that you forgot to say, or anything?
No, I think thanks to you both as well, to Geraldine and to Michelle for having me on the podcast. It's been an honour not only to be on the podcast, but with the work we do with EpiSTEM, it's great to do, and thankfully it seems to have benefits in the wider community as well, which is all in line with all of our goals. I hope you'd agree on that, and it's something that is very beneficial for the school, the space, and the university in general.
Yeah, thanks a million, Eamonn. That's fantastic.
Eamonn.
We were talking today to Eamonn Stack Mulvihill, and Eamonn is an associate teacher here with us in the School of Education, and he's, of course, an EpiSTEM affiliate, and it's been really a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you both.
And today we're going to have Aisling Kearns, a third-year student in the BA in World Music, here in the Irish World Academy of Music and Dance, performing her own poem called Janta Brishta. And a most interesting aspect of this poem, it is already published in a book called The Story Thursday Book. And it was a book written and published by the Limerick Arts Office for their 50th anniversary in 2025. It's a fabulous collection of contemporary poems by 157 poets. And here we have Aisling about to read her own poem called Janta Brishta.
Janta Brishta. What did you see when you first tasted rain? Back when the tar bled under your boots. Didn't you march into the smoke with fire in your fists? The country lines you traced with such loving hands, now bound like veins cut too shallow to save. But it's us, isn't it? Who've lost the run of ourselves. Us with our mouths full of protests, our hands empty of rosaries. Did you not curse the suits in Leinster when they signed your town into exile? When they dug into the earth like grave robbers and stole the pulse of your home. I love her still. She sings to me, even as her voice breaks, even as she cracks my ribs and forces me away. Tá sí fós, I mo chrí agus mo chuid fola. Her rain will stain my skin, even as I cross oceans. I will taste her salt on my tongue. But I'm leaving, and it's tearing me in ways I can't name.